Okay, so Pamela, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today for our students at Waterloo. We're going to talk about smart cities and particularly Toronto. But I wanted to ask you first just to introduce yourself to the students and say what you do here at Ryerson.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Pamela Robinson. I'm a registered professional urban planner in the province of Ontario and associate professor in the School of Urban and Regional Planning, and I'm also the associate dean of grad studies, so I wear many hats. My job here in the School of Planning is I contribute to our graduate program, which teaches students how to become professional planners, not unlike the programs that you have in Waterloo in the faculty in which you're studying.
Thank you. So you're researching data in smart cities. Can you tell me what you're doing with that?
Sure. So for the last 5 years, I've been working with a team of researchers under the umbrella of geothink.ca. I hope you'll come and check out our website. And we're a team of 10 academics across Canada who started out looking at the use of open data and how its use changes the relationship between the public and local governments primarily, although we've done work with provincial governments and federal governments. In that research pool, over the course of the 5 years, we started to see open data moving into open government discussions where government was open, transparent, accountable, and inclusive. But also we started to see the rise of smart city technology. And as a planner, I've always been interested in how planners and the public come together using technology. So this move into smart cities was a natural move out of the open data work. And we got going on that 2 years ago inside this project. And so I've been trying to understand how civic technology, the devices, the apps that people have on their mobile phone devices have been used by planners and by citizens to change their cities. And so the smart city piece of it, technology gathering data about people where they live to improve quality of life, is a natural thing that's flowed from that.
Very interesting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Sidewalk Toronto Waterfront proposal. It's now seems to be progressing, but can you describe what you understand to be the main elements of that development?
Sure. Yeah, so I think cheekily joke that their vision document is like the greatest hits of urban planning. If you haven't read it already, I would encourage everybody in your class to go and have a look at the 200-page document because it's a really rich, robust discussion about the potential of urbanism and technology to come together to make a difference on a big site in Toronto's waterfront. That was released on October 17th, and since then, just 10 days ago, Sidewalk Toronto released its public consultation plan, which starts to map out the kinds of activities Sidewalk Toronto, which is a combination of Waterfront Toronto, and Sidewalk Labs, which is the company that Alphabet Google owns that does urban and digital transformations. Sidewalk Toronto has its plan, and there are a whole range of activities that they're going to host to start to get people talking about what this kind of smart city development on Toronto's waterfront means for the people of the city of Toronto, but really, quite frankly, people in Canada and across North America, and potentially worldwide, because the world is watching this project as it unfolds.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to watch it. So how do you think the lives of people who live and work in the development will be different from the rest of us?
I think it's a really good question. Dan Doctoroff, who's the CEO of Sidewalk Labs, has talked a lot about how they hope the data that they collect will help, what he says, bend the quality of life curve. And that quote really, it's interesting to me. He's also talked about asking the question, what would a city look like if you built it from the internet up? And today in my graduate class, we talked about that, and I was saying that positioning of the question is really hard for me because the last time we built cities around a piece of technology, we ended up with automobile-dependent cities, and now we're trying to reverse that. So I would turn that a little bit on our head and say, what are the issues that matter the most to us in Canadian cities, and to what extent can technology and data play a role in helping us fix them? So I would turn that around. So in terms of how will it be different, I think the people that choose to live there, it should be a really interesting place. Waterfront Toronto has a great track record of building high-quality urban development, so I have no doubt that the quality of life or the quality of the urban form and the design of the buildings and stuff will be great. The public space should be awesome. I think this question of what does it feel like to live there is a really important one. This will probably be the place in Toronto where more data is gathered about individuals than just about anywhere else because the whole place is going to be wired around data gathering. And I don't know what that's going to look and feel like. I think that it's important. One of the things as planners that I care about is how do we get people to be active and vigilant about being aware about data collection? We're all, I don't know about you inside the classroom or abroad, but lots of us just kind of breeze through terms of services when we buy a new app or we get a new app. We just click on I accept, or when you have to update your iPhone, you click on it and Apple makes you confirm again that you've read it, but I bet you very few people ever do. And that's just to use our phones. In terms of that neighborhood, I'm wondering, how do we consent to participate in the data gathering exercise? And how do we keep people active about being aware of it? Because what we want is, if data is going to be gathered about people, we want people to be okay with it, to actively consent rather than informally consenting, I think. So how they manage that is going to be a really interesting thing. In terms of other overall quality of life, I think if they go forward with their autonomous and connected vehicles plan, that's going to give that neighborhood a very different feel, because we don't really know what it's like to have those kinds of vehicles around. We're used to navigating drivers with cars, and so for anyone who's a walker or a cyclist or even another driver, having this new form of technology sharing the public right-of-way that is the road with us is going to be, I think it's going to be curious, and I don't know what that's going to be like, but lots of different things are going to happen there. They're calling it an urban innovation zone. So I think, I don't really know. I think it should feel different because it is different. I think being transparent about it's different should be good, and you should feel like something different is happening when you arrive there. But how that feels day to day, I don't know. And who are the people who are going to be able to live there is a whole other question. So,
do you think there are ways that people will be positively impacted by it? I mean, are there things that will clearly be better about life there?
Well, I think, anytime we build good quality public space, that's good for everybody. Like, I think, it's another piece of Toronto's waterfront. It's a significant piece geographically. So and I think I'm optimistic about this, if the quality of the open space is as great as the other parts of the waterfront, it just adds another piece to it. So there's a positive outcome there. I think that if they're able, through the way this thing is developed, to deliver any high quality affordable housing for people, that'll be a positive thing. I'm reasonably confident that the technology should have good outcomes in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. We've seen lots of other examples of technology being able to do that. So I think there are some good things that will come. I think there are lots of questions that come, but there will certainly be good things. And I think that there will be decisions that we have to make about, there'll be a compromise between, okay, if we let them gather this data, maybe these things can flow from it too. So I think that's the sticky bit for me, is what do we have to trade off to make good things happen?
And on a similar note, are there things that would be clearly negative?
I think there are questions for me. I don't want to presume negativity, because we don't have a lot of, I'm a professor, I like evidence to inform my conclusions. I can talk about the things that concern me. One is who owns the data that's being gathered. I have a concern that I don't have any problem with a private sector firm coming in and being ambitious about pitching a groundbreaking development. That happens in planning all the time. And I think this dance between the private sector pushing us to respond to things that we don't understand, I'm not uncomfortable at all about that. But what I am uncomfortable about is that I don't think we really know what the public good piece of this project looks like yet. I don't think we were ready for this, and it's fine. I don't think they should. I don't know if we ever would have been ready. I think part of it is we needed something really big and audacious to get us thinking, but now that we know what this is, there's lots of stuff to do. So one is we got to figure out who owns the data. A second piece for me would be, what's the public share of whatever profit is derived from the use of that data? If the public isn't going to own it, then what's the cost sharing or the profit taking agreement? Because it's public data. The people who live there are going to generate the data. It's all of our data. We have an austere environment around government. I think government needs a piece of that, if not full ownership. And so I think that that's an interesting piece. I think the privacy piece continues to be a big question. I think there are good signs that that's being taken seriously. From the outset of this project, there were discussions about privacy on the table. So I think the developer, Sidewalk Labs, is aware of privacy, and I think that there are public people who are pushing hard on privacy-related questions. So I don't think that discussion is going to surprise anyone, and I think there will be good, broader outcomes from that discussion taking place. So those would be some of my top concerns. But I also think the other piece of it is just the transparency around the project, which is who's doing what. We've got this hybrid organization called Sidewalk Toronto, which has a public agency that represents government and a private sector developer in a consortium. And so I think if these kinds of public-private partnerships are going to move forward, we need to learn about what to expect from this agglomeration, because we know what government's supposed to do in the planning process and we know what the private sector does. But when they come together to team up, I think we collectively have to learn what can we expect from them, what role are they going to play, and how do we move forward in an open government environment that's transparent, accountable, and inclusive with this new kind of actor playing such a big role.
Very interesting. So Sidewalk Toronto is a development wholly based on technology. How do you see technology influencing urban development in existing city areas? How do you feel that'll impact cities in the future?
Well, I think, if we just talk about autonomous connected vehicles alone, driverless cars, those have huge implications on public space in cities. And even, interesting connections with, for those cars to be able to drive, they need to have really good 3D maps to be able to work off of, because they need to know where curbs are, and they need to know it's not just the roadway, but it's the things around the road. And to make those cars be able to access that information in real time as things change, that means they need to be connected. So we need a new form of high-powered Wi-Fi in downtown cores or wherever they're located. So the technology on the road will have an impact on the physical form, but also on the technology that's needed to make it happen. And then, there's been a lot of discussion about the ethics of programming these vehicles and around safety. And those are really important public issue questions. And, I'm not sure that students right now think about the importance of getting training in ethics and philosophy, but it feels like increasingly being able to reason through the ethical implications of new technology is now as important as ever. So if you need an elective, go take a philosophy class or an ethics class. Because I think we have to sort through this together. I would be very difficult to be the person who has to code the vehicle to decide if there's going to be an accident, who's going to bear the impact of the accident. I mean, humans do that, and we don't know how it works, and we just, we try to make accidents not happen. But now the coders have to anticipate those safety scenarios and plan for them, and I think that's a very impossibly hard task. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing ethical concerns about technology, perhaps more on the agenda now than they have been almost ever before. The past year, we've seen that be something that's accelerated.
And around artificial intelligence too. Our research team is ramping up to do a new big research project on artificial intelligence in cities. And some of the most pressing issues involve job loss and basic income, and the kinds of things that people who've been socially minded in their planning or their government work have focused about. But planners are going to have to get their heads around these things, as well as business people too. Because if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to advance these kinds of technology tools, you need to be ready for people to ask you good and hard questions about what's in it for the public, and what are the risks and what are the opportunities, and how do we take advantage of the good things, but also mitigate the negative impacts of the bad things. So
this must be really changing the job of an urban planner. I mean, for them to anticipate the impact, the cumulative impact of all these new technologies and the potential for new forms of cities.
Yeah, maybe, but planners' jobs have always been to look to the future, to figure out what's coming and how to get ready. I mean, that's what we do. I joke that my job is in Godzilla and SimCity. We got to figure out when's Godzilla coming and how do we get ready, and when can we be prepared, and when do we just have to deal with the results. So I think we've always had that skill set. I think the challenge is that technology is increasingly complicated. Algorithmic governance, the decisions made by artificial intelligence and how cities and governments deal with that is a really important issue. The City of New York has actually just struck a task force on algorithmic governance to try to understand how to regulate artificial intelligence in the City of New York proper. And so, but the challenge is that, we have people who don't even understand how to use their mobile phones. Lots of us use 5 or 10% of the capacity on the thing that's in our back pocket. Artificial intelligence is many magnitudes much more complicated. Data goes in, and the quality of the data, is it any good? Are we training our machines on good data sets or crappy data? And then it gets crunched inside this black box and stuff comes out the other side. And we're used to making decisions about publicly reviewable knowledge and information. The environmental assessment process in cities, when you build a new bridge or a road, you can see the data, and you can see the mechanism by which that data was analyzed. When artificial intelligence does it, it's inside a box that's protected by a proprietary arrangement that's owned by the person who owns the AI. And so these are really big challenges for planners, but also for politicians and for people who buy technology. So I think we've always looked to the future, but the challenge is, how do we get better at dealing with future change that comes with very complicated and opaque technology? That's our challenge, I think.
Very interesting. And just to look at one area of that, the environmental impact of smart cities. Could you talk a little bit about what you think that might be?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting, because there are certainly, if you look at, and some of you may have devices in your home, like a Nest device, where you're able to control the temperature in your house in a different way. There's discussions about new kinds of waste management that'll go in this process. So I think my suspicion is that there'll be good environmental outcomes. The challenge for me is at what cost. And for a long time, like back when I was young, it used to be environment versus economy. We still have a little bit of that now, but I think we've grown in terms of our sophistication, in terms of understanding that good environmental performance is good for economic performance. What I worry about a little bit with this project is that we may have social and environmental issues in tension. And so there's a different tension in that sustainability triangle, which is, if we want the fully robust environmental outcomes, we may have to trade off some equity concerns around who gets to live there. Maybe it won't be affordable for everybody, or we have to relinquish some of our privacy or more of our data to gain access to the performance information we need environmentally. And so we haven't seen that tension in the same way. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's one of the things that I've been thinking about and talking about with my students recently, which is, are we going to see a different kind of tension inside sustainability? I don't know. We'll see. I think but good public conversation and deliberation will help with those things, right? We make trade-off decisions all the time. I just think we need to be aware of what we're trading off.
Well, just with that in mind, the impact that smart cities might have on government, how might it affect the relationship between citizens and government?
Well, I think, in its idealized state, like smart city proprietors, people who sell the technology, say that it will make people more connected to government. Certainly that's the hope. But I guess the questions that I would ask as a planner are, what kinds of people and connected how? We have 13% of Canadians don't have any regular access to the internet at all. And then of the 83% of Canadians who do, what form does that access take? I mean, having access at the public library once a week for half an hour is not the same as an unlimited data plan in your back pocket. And so we lack data about who's connected where and how. And that's the connectivity piece, and the connection between citizens and government in the smart city is utterly dependent on how citizens connect to government right now. And so unless we can deliver, a basic level of good connectivity to everybody, there'll be some people who benefit more from smart cities than others, because the people who are the most connected will probably have the most privilege. And that worries me as a planner. We have the same problem in real life without the technology. Trying to make sure that everybody has access to government in a way that's fair and equitable is already a challenge. The technology, I think, could exacerbate that.
Okay, and to take that a stage further, then community services and their impact with smart cities, presumably some people will have potentially easier access to those too.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's one of those things that remains to be figured out. Certainly, Google has this city block healthcare provider service, which, in the context of American healthcare makes a lot of sense, but we have universal healthcare in Ontario, we've got community access, and we've got family community health networks. So we have a very different system of healthcare. I don't know how that one fits in. I think that what we don't want to see is kind of bespoke community services provided to people who are connected, and then kind of sloppy seconds provided to the people who are the most in need. So again, this equity lens really matters. We have to find a way, if there's going to be change, we need to deliver it to everybody, not just the people who have the privilege of being most connected.
Two further questions.
Okay.
The light's a bit difficult, but the second last one, would you like to live there? Would you want to live in the Sidewalk development?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think I kind of got to wait and see what it looks like. I really like where we live right now. I certainly go visit. I don't know. I think it depends. I don't know. Yeah, maybe, but probably not. I don't know.
It's hard to know yet, I guess.
I don't even know what it entirely is. What I do hope is that it's the kind of place that lots of people will want to live, because it's affordable and it's inclusive and it's connected. We need it. It needs to be amazing, because there's not a lot of space left in the city to build. And, I really, in my optimistic heart of hearts as a planner, I desperately hope they can find a way to deliver amazing affordable housing to people who don't have that access right now, because we really need it.
Absolutely. So for young people who are thinking about how their lives will be in the city of the future, do you have anything that you could say to help them?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that this project has shown us is that we need to be ready for change. And in a big city like Toronto, I've said this for a long time, but part of our social contract here is change. If you don't like change, Toronto's not a good place to live. We're a city that welcomes new people all the time. We're a city that's growing. Our urban form is changing. So I think that if you are change resistant or change isn't pleasing to you, you should be mindful that the world is going to continue to change around us. And so being comfortable riding change is really important. I have kids. I have a 14 and 11-year-old. I don't have any idea how to future-proof them right now. But I think that everybody, whether it's new technology or not, needs to continue to find things that they feel passionate about doing. I mean, it sounds really easy because I'm middle-aged and everyone watching this is young and still in school. But if you're going to work for the rest of your life, finding something that you care about, that matters to you, is really important. And skill sets are going to be rapidly changing. And so I think you want to be both aware of change, but also recognize that there's some basic skills that matter no matter what the technology is. Being a clear communicator, being able to take complicated ideas and distill them down into simple things are good ideas. I think being comfortable working with data, even if you're not ever going to code, understanding what data can do is probably a really important thing to do. And being aware of the world around you. Being a good critical thinker. The age of the smart city, we're already bombarded with all kinds of messages. Being able to discern between which ones are good and which ones, are fake news is really important. So, we need to be good critical thinkers, and those are platform independent. Those are good whether you're going to be a mathematician, an entrepreneur, a public school teacher, or a doctor or a nurse, right? So, or an urban planner. We have a master's program if this stuff is interesting to you. So does Waterloo. So I think that these kinds of things are really important regardless of what kind of technology we're seeing.
Thank you, Pamela, for
You're
taking
welcome.
the time to talk with the students and me today. And it's wonderful. This has been valuable.
Nice to meet you, everyone. Thank you.